Meanwhile, to commemorate Africa Day, a pan-African movement known as Africans Rising is being launched throughout the continent. The group is also mobilizing small groups across Nigeria today for symbolic activities. Africa Day is the annual commemoration of the foundation of the Organization of African Unity, now known as the African Union, on May the 25th, 1963. It's celebrated in various countries on the African continent as well as around the world. Now, to tell us more about this new movement, we're being joined live by Olatunji Olariwaju, one of the Nigerian coordinators of the group. You're welcome to the program.
Good afternoon. Thank you for hosting me.
Well, tell us more about your movement, Africans Rising.
Africans Rising, like you aptly described, is a decentralized movement of young Africans that is being, we are trying to reawaken people. It's a decentralized movement and of young Africans to start demanding for justice, for peace, for dignity of life within their respective countries, within their respective spheres of life. And that's the whole essence of this. And it's not a coincidence that we chose the African Day. We chose the African Liberation Day for the launch of this. It's a resurgence of Africa. Pan-Africanism has practically almost waned off. The last time we had the spirit of Pan-Africanism across the continent was in the colonial struggle. That was a time a lot of old African leaders, those who are no longer in the affairs of Africa now, who no longer function in their respective countries. If you talk about Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, those were the time. Even among them were Nigerian leaders like Nnamdi Azikiwe. We have even Abat Macaulay in those days. But we don't have Pan-Africanism anymore. And a lot of us are dissatisfied about the state of our affairs on the African continent. It is such that Africa is always featuring on the global index for humanitarian crisis, on the global index for poverty, on the global index for underdevelopment. It is not fit and proper. We see a new Africa where people will speak up. People will learn how to demand good governance from their government. People will learn how to demand for transparency from their government. An African where we will no longer have sit-tight leaders. An African that is democratic, an African that is just, an African that will be peaceful for his people, an African that will be prosperous. And that's the whole essence of African Rising. Africans Rising, there is Africa rising, but we are saying Africans are rising. Africans Rising is a new movement of Africans. It is decentralized. People are gathered in Obafemi Awolowo University as I speak to you. People are gathered in Lagos as I speak to you. It's not a large pool of people, but it's a decentralized movement. And people are encouraged to speak up. Let us take Africa back. Let us take Africa back from the cliff.
Right. Why the decision to launch the movement on Africa Day?
Yeah, because it is very significant. Africa Day, you know that today in history was the day the Organization of African Union was conceived, was launched, and it is now called the African Union. It is also the popular day we call the African Liberation Day. I think that was as declared by Kwame Nkrumah then. It is to signify liberation, that there's a new emergence, there's an emergence of African we are seeking that is going to be led by Africans. There's an independent Africa that we are seeking that is going to be led by young Africans. The future of Africa is such that it's not going to be dependent on aids that come from foreign countries. It's not going to be dependent on aids that come from EU or the United States. It is an Africa that will be built by its own people, through its own resources, through its own human capital, through its own energy. And today is the new day for the freedom of Africa.
Let's look at the African Union, which is being celebrated today. How well would you say that the body has achieved its mandate?
A lot of us, it's out for the jury to decide, but a lot of us are dissatisfied with the whole AU, with the AU as it is right now, because you find that even the impact and the effectiveness of the AU is in doubt. You find across Africa, there are huge violations of basic human rights across Africa, from different parts of the continent to another. You find sit-tight leaders, you find you find a lot of injustices are being perpetrated against people. You find religious crises, you find ethnic wars going on, and because the African leaders are not organized enough, because the concept of the OAU has not been given enough power to be able to rein in all its leaders, to be able to come together to tackle the problem collectively. Everybody has been working at suboptimal level. We have been working at cross purposes, Francophone Africa, Anglophone Africa, you find even the Spanish-speaking Africa. So we need to come to a table about a common agenda for Africa. If you look at Africa as it is today, there is no real system that connects African countries. We are talking about free trade across Africa. Yet it is easier for many Nigerians, for instance, to get a visa into the US than to get a visa into South Africa. It is easier for you to land on the border, for a foreigner to land at the borders of Ghana, for instance, than to come to probably proceed to Algeria or Morocco. And if you are talking about an Africa where countries will be able to trade with each other without restriction, you have to look at even the movement of the people. You have to look at the common identity. We have to be able to sit down and see that, okay, we have a shared agenda for prosperity, a shared agenda for development. You don't even have an highway that connects multiple countries across Africa. We need to talk about even a trans-African pipeline, for instance, that will probably leave from the Niger Delta of Nigeria and terminate in South Africa. We don't invest in Africa. It's just a few entrepreneurs who are throwing money into the African continent. People like Dangote, and there's a particular one, a young man from Tanzania. It's just a handful of individuals who are investing in Africa. African entrepreneurs and leaders are taking money out.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on Africa Day. That's Olatunji Olarewaju speaking to us there.